It's time again for another episode of the Doc Review Show. This week, we're taking a look at the 2017 documentary called Gray State.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Doc Review Show. Joining me as always is Indiana's #1 educator, aka Dewey Finn, Justin Seymour. What's happening, man?
Dewey Finn. Oh my gosh. What a
Do you get that?
I don't even understand that reference. Like, Dewey Finn. Who is Dewey Finn? Tell me.
Okay, well, do we give it away or do
Yeah, give it away. Let's go. Come on,
okay, he's the teacher from School of Rock.
Oh, right. He goes by Mr. S, Ned Schneebly. Yeah, because it's his friend. Remember in the movie, his friend is actually the teacher. He's not really the teacher, and he takes the job. And so he goes by Ned Schneebly, but you're right. His real name is Dewey Finn in the movie. That's true.
Well, so my lame ass, I just Googled teachers in movies, and that came up, and I haven't seen that movie forever, so I just thought, oh, his name was Dewey Finn. I forgot that he had a different name. So. Yeah,
because he goes by his friend Ned Schneebly. That's good. That's solid reference. This week we are reviewing Gray State. This documentary is actually a documentary that follows the story of a filmmaker creating a movie called Gray State, who was deployed to Afghanistan and Iraq. He was a soldier, came back to the United States, and wanted to become a filmmaker to depict his view of where America was going. So let's take a moment and look at the trailer.
What is Gray State?
Gray State is less a movie than it is a warning. We do not live in a dictatorship, but we do live in a police state. What we're going to see is the unveiling of this Gray State foisted upon America.
Well, you know, this film was somewhat different than what I thought it was when I saw the trailer. And actually, it was better than what I thought it was going to be, because some of it looked kind of cheesy the way they were doing the filming and the shooting. I thought it was going to be a documentary mixed with like live action, you know, reenactments, and I'm normally not a big fan of those, so I was negative for it right when I started watching it. But after the first, I think, half hour when they gave away the first big reveal, I was sold on it. So not one of the best documentaries in the world, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, but for me it was good. It was I would say around the average area, so I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you as well. And when I started watching it, I was like, what is this documentary supposed to be about? I actually had to go Google because it wasn't clear to me when I started watching it what this documentary was going to be about. And I had to actually Google what it was, the synopsis, to actually have a clear understanding of where it was going to go. So I agree with you. I didn't think it was the best documentary in the world, and we'll talk about who it was for. I also give it a 6 out of 10. It wasn't horrible, but it was also, some people would be interested in it. In particular, I think people that are fans of the filmmaker they covered, David Crowley, would be interested in this film.
If you're a fan of Alex Jones, I think this will probably be up your alley, and you might appreciate this. Some ex-military, I'm sure, would like it. But overall, it looks like Justin and I are in agreement. It's not the best documentary in the world. It has to be for a niche audience. So we both give it a 6 out of 10, but we also think there are some interesting things in here that we'd like to discuss and also see what you think about it, because a lot of these movie topics affect all of us in the United States. Here forward, we're going to be talking about different plot points and spoilers, so if you're not interested in those types of things, you should probably bail. All right. You know what this reminded me of, Justin, is that film that you recommended to me, that documentary film Zeitgeist. Did you see some common themes in there too?
At first, I thought that's what it was going to be. And then as I was watching it, I didn't really see a basis of conspiracism in the film. So let's give the people who are listening a broad overview of the film, and then we can talk about this whole conspiracy element and all that. So the film is obviously about this. It's a documentary about a filmmaker who never made a movie. So to be honest with you, one of the reasons I gave this a 6 was because I'm not sure this was a story that needed to be told. I didn't really see anything about this story that was a necessity to tell. I think the reason this documentary was made was for people who were already fans of the filmmaker David Crowley, who had developed an online buzz with the making of his film Gray State. He had kind of taken on, I don't want to say like this like cult personality, but in a sense online, he had started to develop a huge following of people that were waiting for him to come out with his work. So I think people were interested in his story after what happens to him at the end. So I think this movie was made specifically for people that knew the filmmaker, because as I was watching it, as someone who was not familiar with his work or not familiar with this individual, I'm kind of like, throughout most of the film, like, why should I care about this story? But for people who are in that niche already, they probably would.
Well, so I think that the reason it was made, I agree with you to some points, but the director, he had produced Grizzly Man. Have you ever heard of that movie, that doc?
Yeah, but I haven't watched that one.
So it's a guy that kind of spirals into a little bit of insanity while he's hanging out with these bears, and of course he ends up getting mauled by these bears. But sure. I believe the director, or the producer of that movie was the director of this movie, and I think it was the element of somebody spiraling downward, and that is why he produced it. And just so you know, the executive producer, I don't know if you've heard of Werner Herzog, but he's the executive producer, and he was the director of Grizzly Man. So these are very competent documentarians making this film, and that's why I was kind of surprised about some of the elements in here that I didn't think were top notch. So to follow up on your point about kind of what it is, I do think it is about a guy that's spiraling downward. And the one thing they didn't really talk about too much was the PTSD factor. And they even alluded to that it wasn't a factor. And I don't know how that gets chopped out. Just because he presented himself early on as sane and just some guy that's trying to make a movie, he saw some heavy stuff over in Afghanistan and Iraq. So I gotta believe that the PTSD was somewhere. And of course, I'm just guessing, but PTSD had something to do with it.
Yeah, that was my thought as well. I was surprised that it wasn't brought up in the film really at all. And I said the same thing probably about 3/4 of the way through the movie.
It kind of makes me wonder if, since they had the dad and they had all the family and friends, or a lot of them in this video, I wonder if they agreed to some terms of saying, well, as the family, we'd rather you not talk about this or that. But even that's a stretch, because they talked about a lot of crazy stuff.
Yeah. So, okay. So I'm sure the people listening are like, all right, what is going on? Because this was kind of a hard thing for me to even understand what this film was about in the first, 10 minutes of the film. Maybe we should give the outlines. Okay. So this guy he's a filmmaker. He was, originally he was a soldier deployed to Afghanistan and Iraq, comes back to the United States, has this idea for a movie he wants to make, enrolls in film school and all that.
Well, let me cut you off there. Let me even say a little bit better. So this guy growing up had made a film. He had made like a high school film. It revolved around mostly had guns, and his buddies were just shooting his stuff, and just made this this B movie about these army guys. 9/11 happens. Him and his buddy take this moment and say, hey, you know what? I want to go defend my country. So they go over and they fight, or they're in the war. He comes back home after one tour, meets his soon-to-be wife, marries her, as he finds out he has to go back for another tour, which he did not want to do.
After 6 weeks of knowing her, by the way.
Oh, yeah, good point. 6 weeks of knowing her, but he's going back to war, right? So he wants, I think, some type of bond at home. I can't blame him. Lots of servicemen get married right as they're about ready to go back into in the line of fire. So he goes back begrudgingly to this war, and he sees some horrific things. He comes back home, and he goes to film school. He starts film school, and then in 2010, he starts to write Gray State. Right?
Yes, and interestingly, he actually creates the trailer for Gray State first, and he hasn't even written the script yet. He creates this trailer, puts it out online for people to see, and then crowdfunds his own salary for writing the script for Gray State.
Right, but he also was doing that in the hopes that somebody bigger would see it. So he crowdfunds $60,000. It's not what they asked for. I think they asked for like $10,000 or something, right?
Well, maybe 50 because I think they met 123% of their goal.
Okay, whatever it was, they exceeded the amount they were supposed to get.
Right.
So fast forward a little bit longer, and he actually made like 3 or 4 different versions of the trailer of script and of visuals. So this guy is a very, I guess, what you'd call a perfectionist. He believes in perfectionism at whatever cost. He goes out to California, I think in like 2012, 2013. He meets with these gentlemen from the Michaels production group, and just correct me if I say anything wrong, Justin. Mm. And then they offer him a script writing option, and he says great. He comes back home, thinks everything is wonderful. No, this is in 2014. He thinks everything is wonderful. He comes back home, rewrites the scripts, sends it to these producers. They come back and say, this wasn't really what we were thinking of, so we think it more of maybe as a TV series. And this crushes Justin. Justin, that's you. This crushes Crowley. It makes him feel like he's not what he thought he was. So him and his family they start to lose contact with their family members. They stop returning texts. People start to speculate what's going on. And in the meantime, David has actually changed from doing this movie because he was disappointed to doing a documentary about this subject matter. So he ends up switching gears and starts making this documentary about the Gray State as opposed to the fictional film that he was making. In the meantime, and you can actually go on their Facebook page and still see his Facebook post. He is slowly writing some crazy stuff. He says he's drinking abstinence. I think, is that how you say it?
Absinthe.
Absinthe?
I have no idea.
It's an alcohol that they used to have in France, but it makes you crazy, or not crazy, but it's hallucinogenic. And
interesting.
And as Christmas approaches, Christmas Day, I believe, he ends up. Should we get into this? I mean,
yeah.
Okay, so on Christmas Day, he takes a gun to his wife. He takes a gun to his baby, kills his daughter, kills both of them, and then he puts the gun on himself and kills himself. Fast forward to the next day, his brother actually comes by the house, sees the dog, but it doesn't see anybody else, so he leaves the presents on the front door, on the front patio, leaves, and everybody just thinks that it's the status quo because David hasn't been responding anyways. On January 17th of 2015, the neighbors come home, and I can't remember what brought them over there. It's just something was odd. They go over there and they see the dog, the dog's barking. That's what they found was odd. Long story short, they go in there, they see the bodies. They call the police. The police come out, and the police rule it a suicide murder.
Double homicide with suicide. Yeah.
Right. So I think that's kind of the overview, right?
Yeah, that's a solid overview, I would say. And again, I have to go back to say, unlike the other films we've done so far, I didn't really take a huge amount of notes on this film because as I'm watching it, I just want to say that there really wasn't a huge amount that was deeply compelling to me in terms of interest. Now, this guy was interesting in terms of he seems to be very solid mentally at first, especially. And I guess that's what the film is about. Like you said, it's the spiraling out of control mentally until they lose control and then they do something crazy.
Yeah, but they didn't. I agree with you. That's part of my problem with it. They didn't really cover that. A lot of the stuff I just said, I got from an article. I think it's the New Yorker, and I'll put the New Yorker links in the show notes. But a lot of the stuff I got from other sources, I didn't get from the film, and
totally.
That's part of my problem with the film is that they seem to mostly cover that he's making this dystopian future film, which is fine. Go ahead and cover that. But like you said, I don't think it was that big a deal, him making this film.
Right.
And especially when you see some of the snippets of the film, to me, no offense to the Christian films out there, but it made me think of like Christian films. It's just like, okay, so they kind of know how to make films, but it's also kind of, I don't know.
I know exactly what you're saying. And then another thing about the film, this documentary that I didn't think was that good. They tried to show an element of conspiracy surrounding the death of Crowley. See, the people, from what I understand watching the documentary, is that the people that were fans of him online, because like I said, he gained an online presence, a lot of them felt there was a conspiracy surrounding his death, that perhaps the American government had come in to kill him and his family and then make it look like a murder-suicide because they didn't want his movie, Gray State, to be released. And I think that is the most absurd Alex Jonesy type thing I've ever heard. And
I agree with you, but I think there's one part of that you're leaving out that I found strange too, but it didn't lead me to conspiracy. Is that by where they were found, above them, written in blood by David, it said,
Allah Akbar. That means, it's not praise to God, right? Or what is that?
Well, it's God is great.
That. God is great, right?
And on the floor next to Camille was the Quran. So the followers of David were like, no way, he would never do that. He would never do that type of thing. But, and I don't always believe that what the police say, but there was no other evidence, anybody else coming forward saying that it was anything else other than a murder-suicide. So I agree with you. I think the conspiracy is weak, but I think there is a conspiracy out there. I think that there are people that believe this. So for them to say that there's a conspiracy that exists, I think they're right. And think about this, a conspiracy fits in very nicely with the people that follow an Alex Jones, right?
Totally. Right. That's what I'm saying, right. The people that would watch this film are already conspiracy nuts by nature. And so one thing I didn't like about this doc was
sounds like a lot. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, right. Well, it is true actually. And there was look at who they interviewed about the nature of conspiracy surrounding this. It was these two guys who were like, they're on the internet sharing videos that they think about Crowley. You know what I mean? Like, they called them citizen investigators. There was, you know what I mean? There was
yeah, right. Which means what? Anybody then?
Right. They just interviewed two guys that are on the internet that have never met Crowley in person or know anything about him personally. They just have been following him and are fans of him. And now suddenly after his death, they have a conspiracy to follow because they think that, wow, this story that he was going to be telling about America becoming this, totalitarian police state, man, they must have really wanted to silence him. And I don't know.
Once you get into this wrong territory, once you start treading into these waters, there is a backlash.
Did the government want to silence him and his film?
Guys out here going after the truth get knocked off.
They ruled it a double murder followed by a suicide at the hands of David without any real investigation. I'm not in law enforcement. I don't have a background in detective work, but how it happened, I would say it's undetermined.
If you're going to try to add a conspiracy element in this documentary to get me interested, don't interview like two YouTube guys that are like old white guys that probably barely know how to use YouTube. You know what I mean?
No, you're basically saying somebody that's not credentialed, because there could be some old white dudes that barely know how to use YouTube that would know, but uncredentialed, they're just not really authoritative experts. And
actually, one of the YouTube guys says, being credentialism has nothing to me. Like, did you see that part? He goes like, credentials mean nothing to me. Like, he's like, I'm after the truth, and.
Oh yeah.
How are you doing today, Greg?
I'm doing good. It's hot, but that's okay.
Good.
I don't give a crap about credibility at all. Credibility means nothing to me.
I'm like, okay, that's great, but really.
But I don't necessarily blame those two individuals. I blame the filmmaker for saying, hey, let's leave this in there. And while we're shitting on the filmmaker, let me go a step further. That was all reenactment. They're reenacting those two guys talking online while they're watching YouTube videos. And it's just like, that's just cheeseball. And the other thing that I found cheeseball was just the way some of the interviews were set up, like the one where the guy, it says Gray State on his computer. Okay, so you're doing a promotion at the same time while you're interviewing this guy. Just how some of the interviews were set up, I was not a fan of. But the bigger thing is why would you pick? It seemed like cherry picking those conspiracy people to directly appease to who might like this film. One other thing I think they cherry picked on was, you remember that so David had this big plot wall where he basically had his movie laid out with just hundreds of post-it notes going from the beginning of his film to the end. And every once in a while, they would during the documentary, they would cut to him, and David would be talking about upcoming things in his film, and then they try to make the documentary itself correlate to what he was saying. And I just felt like, come on, you're stretching it. You're just making some of these points in the documentary so you can match up with what what David's saying on his plot wall. Did you catch that?
I did, yeah. They tried to use them as like segments of the documentary of the film.
Right, which I guess if it really worked, then that would be fine. I just think they cherry picked their moments and then kind of made it work. And that's how, but let's face it, that's how conspiracies work a lot of times. I mean, 1% of the time the conspiracies are a conspiracy. But in my belief, 99% of the other time, it's just people leading one piece of information to another piece of information, connecting them two together, but not really having a real connection there.
Do you guys just haven't looked into it?
Honestly, with me on this film, I just thought there was a story that I'm not sure needed to be told. No, but no one knows. But the film does do a good job of pointing out no one will know why. And it does seem kind of bewildering as to why he decides to kill his family and himself and write Allah Akbar on the wall when they're not Muslim. It is strange. I mean, of course. And whenever there is no motive, that leaves room for conspiracy theory. But I just don't think that there's much more to the story that's more interesting than why would a person go and do such a crazy thing like kill themselves and their family when they seemed relatively happy.
I agree with you. You have a ex-military person that didn't want to go back on another tour, begrudgingly do so, and he ends up killing his family and himself. But not once do they say anything about, well, maybe it was PTSD, maybe it was some type of mental thing. I think I know why it happened. The guy had something wrong with him mentally. There was a mental issue inside his mind, and I believe that his wife loved him dearly, and I think she just kind of followed suit. She kind of not that she wanted to be shot, but she blinded herself to some of his craziness because of the fact that she wanted to be with him. And
like following a cult leader.
Yeah, it was kind of cultish because he definitely controlled her. She started to pull away from friends and family when that wasn't typically her MO. And so I just don't understand why they didn't at least bring up the PTSD issue and say, hey, was it this? As opposed to saying, we don't know why. He just did it.
Right, I totally agree, and honestly, that's the most interesting part of the film. It's just the question of, I wonder why a person would do something like that, and that's it.
Do you want to know a fun, gross fact about this movie?
Of course,
that we can end on.
Let's do it.
So the dog was in the home after they killed themselves for
I thought about this.
20-some days. What do you think the dog ate?
I was wondering the exact same thing. Did you think this up?
No. Actually, I read an article. It's proven. He ate the family members. He ate parts of their body to stay alive.
Watching it, I was like, how long was this dog in this house alone, but it was still alive after, it was like 3 weeks. No one had been there. Okay, that makes sense to me now. One other truly disturbing fact that the film does point out, unlike this dog issue, is that Crowley, I guess when they would have found him, there would have been music playing in the house, right?
Yep.
So he had made a playlist to the killing of him and his family that he had played in the house, and it was on repeat for, I guess, 3 weeks after they had been killed.
So the playlist kept going until the batteries ran out. So I think once they found him, the batteries had ran out on the speakers. But yeah, I'm sure for a good week, they just had this probably god-awful playlist of songs. Oh, I didn't look at this. Did you look at the song list?
No, but they played one of them, I think, at the end as the outro song of the film.
Right. It sounded like a Nickelback song or something. I wasn't a fan of whatever it was. But I keep thinking there's nothing more to say about this film, and there's not really about the film, but one other thing I want to say about just this surrounding it is so if you go look online, and I'll put the links in the show notes, the family did release the documentary that David was working on when he killed himself. So his documentary is actually available on YouTube right now, and it's about 2 hours and 40 minutes long. I started watching some of it, but in my mind, it was just pretty amateurish documentary. I didn't think it was that great, and I thought it was a lot of the sky is falling, the world is coming down around us. And listen, I don't think either Justin and I are either big fans of government crushing our souls as citizens, but there has to be a point of saying, okay, what's reality and what's fantasy?
Oh, so you can watch Gray State now?
You can watch Gray State, the documentary.
Right, but not the film that he was working on, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I don't think I have anything else on Gray State.
Okay. Well, Justin, it looks like we have done another episode.
Right on.
I hope. I don't know. We'll see when we actually put this out. Wait, so we do a podcast. What's this called? Is this a VCast? What are they called? Videos that are podcasts?
That's a good question. I don't know. A video podcast.
It's not really a vlog.
No, it's not it's not that. I guess it's just a podcast that you can watch.
All right, sounds good. Justin, where can people find you if they want to give you a quick talking to about how you're shitting on America?
Right. The best place is, of course, Facebook. They can find me, Justin Seymour, on Facebook. I'm not big on Twitter, but maybe I should get a Twitter account. You think? Because that seems like the way of the world is going.
Nah, I don't know, man, to be honest with you. I mean, I have Twitter, but that's probably the least used social media platform. I think Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, and a website.
Right. I'll need to get a website, Alan. You going to build that for me?
Oh, no. I'll help. But.
I can build one with Wix. Hey, Wix, can you be a sponsor in the show, please? Thank you.
So you can get me at my shitty website, alancberry.com. And if you want to go there and say, oh, wow, he does suck at making websites, go to it. Okay. Thanks, everyone. You know what outro music I should put?
What's that?
I'll just play it.
Mr. Crowley.